How's it going, people? Somebody came to this art exhibit and then ate the banana off the wall. And this banana is worth, I don't know, $60,000 or more because it's art. How much shampoo do I go through monthly? Probably a cubic liter. A cubic kiloliter. Pantene Pro V. Actually, I'm not sure what shampoo I'm using right now, but it's minty. Have you guys used like a mint-based shampoo where it tingles the top of your head? Menthol. It's the best kind of shampoo. I love that. We'll get started in like 1 minute. Give people a little bit of a chance to get out of bed. You like the background music? Do you guys know what this is from? Good for your scalp. I love that shampoo. Ike says he Shazammed it because he was curious. Yeah, this is tavern music from World of Warcraft, which I haven't played intentionally because I don't think you would ever see me again. That's happened to a lot of people that play WoW, right? That's a dangerous proposition. All right, everybody. Let's get started today. I'll turn off this chat box on the side, but I'll continue to monitor the chat so I can keep up with any questions you have. So, we've been talking about a problem called the regulator problem. So, the first thing I want to do is recap quickly what a regulator problem is. So, we know that for controls, we are tracking, or we're trying to track a reference signal. So that's like the desired behavior of our system. We want our system to go to a specific place, and we design a controller so that it does go there, and it does it in the manner that we specify. Now, the special thing about the regulation problem is that the reference signal is 0 for all time. So I showed you some examples of regulator problems at the beginning of last class. I think a perfect example is when you're trying to balance something. And there's a lot of examples of balancing robots. I think they're really cool. So if your reference is just 0, the output error, so the difference between your reference and your measured output, well, if this is 0, then it's just minus y of k. So we're starting to work with discrete time state space models. And using state space is a really great way to solve regulator problems. And so we're doing this from the context of state space. So this is the form of a discrete time state space model. It's made up of two parts. The first part is your output equation. So it's just saying what your output is. And right now we're just working with single input, single output, but I want you to remember that all these boldface symbols in here or variables, that represents a vector. So in general, we could have many outputs. So like the number of outputs we can have is m, and this is like an m by 1 vector. X is our states, vector of states, and we can have n states. The number of states is usually larger than the number of outputs. We have our control input vector, and we could have r inputs. So you could have multiple inputs, multiple outputs, multiple states, okay? Usually, the D matrix is 0. The D matrix is called your direct transmission matrix. Usually 0. So in that case, y of k is just c times your state vector. And that, because our error is just equal to minus y, that means our error is our C matrix, which is our output matrix, times our state vector. Now your goal for control systems is so that this output error goes to 0. That's the whole point, that we don't want any tracking error between our reference and what our output's actually doing. So if we want our error to go to 0, because of this equation over here, that implies that our state vectors have to go to 0. Because the error is just the C matrix times your states. The C matrix is going to be non-zero, so in order to make this 0, x has to go to 0 eventually. Now here on the right, how can your states go to 0? Well, the way I see it, there's two possibilities. The first one, if your state space, or if your system, so here I'm showing the homogeneous part of our state equation, so this doesn't have the effect of the input. If this is a stable system, and if we don't even use an input, our control input, if we say, okay, that's just going to be 0, we know a stable system, if you just let it go on its own, it eventually goes to 0. So if our system is stable in the first place, then the regulation problem can be easy because that system will tend to go to 0 by itself. All right? But there's a caveat here. In this case, we don't control, if we're not using a control input, we don't control how quickly it goes to 0. The system's just doing that on its own. So it could be a stable system that slowly decays to 0. Well, what if you want to do it a little faster? Well, then you're going to have to start using some control to help it reach there. So that brings me to the second point. The other way that we can bring the states to 0 is, well, the system could be stable or unstable. And it's more interesting when it's unstable. Like on its own, it doesn't go anywhere near where you want it to go. So in this case, we define the control input to be this. It's minus k times our state vector. K is our, what's it called? I'm drawing a blank. All right. For now, I'm going to call it the control gain matrix. I think that's what it is. Yeah, the gain. Yeah, you're right. It's the gain matrix. All right. So if you set U equal to this, the gain matrix times your states, then that means that our state equation, which is equal to this, if you make that substitution in there, it's going to be A minus BK times your states. So we choose this gain matrix so that the eigenvalues of this A minus BK, this is what I like to call our ACL. This is the closed loop system matrix. So we choose our gain so that the eigenvalues of this closed loop system matrix are equal to Z star. And Z star for us, that just means our target poles all the time. So target poles are going to define how fast our system is, etc. And this is the essence of state feedback control. So we're going through an example to show how we follow this second path, okay? Now, so what we started to do last time is we said, let's do this inverted pendulum problem where I'm trying to make it so that this thing is balanced straight up. But gravity tends to make it fall over. So this is going to be an unstable system on its own. This thing wants to fall over. But what we're going to do is we're going to control the horizontal motion of this base so that we prevent it from falling over. So that's our regulator example problem. And so I started going through how we derive the equations of motion. But guys, I made a mistake. I left something out. The thing that I left out is highlighted here in red. So if you look at the free body diagram on this pendulum, you have gravity acting at its center of mass, and it's trying to pull it down. We have a horizontal reaction force at this pin joint, but we forgot about the vertical reaction force. This is important because this generates a moment about the CG. There's a little bit of a lever arm there, so even though there's this normal force coming up from the bottom, it creates a moment about the CG. We missed out on that. So, you can go through these steps again. I put the details like the sum of forces, sum of moments. We use some kinematic relationships. We do some substitutions. And the point is, we get to a revised equation of motion down here. So this is the angular acceleration of the pendulum. It depends on the angle of the pendulum. Like if it's tipped over pretty far, then it's going to be hard to send it back up to vertical again. And we said that our control input is the acceleration of the base. So, what I want to spend today doing is, once you have a continuous time model like this, if you want to apply digital controls techniques, like if you want to use the state feedback method we described up above, you have to convert this into discrete time. So that's what we're talking about all today, converting a continuous time model into discrete time. All right, so let's go to the next page. All right, in my opinion, the easiest way to convert a continuous time model into a discrete time model, because there's more than one way to do this, but this is the easiest way in my opinion, is convert your continuous time model into a continuous time state space model and then convert that into a discrete time state space model. So there's other ways to go. Like, first you could convert your continuous time model into a continuous time transfer function, like in the Laplace domain, and then you can convert that to a transfer function in the discrete domain with the z variable. That's difficult to do. And there's other ways to do it as well. This, from what I can see, it's the easiest way. So this is the way we're going to do it. So we're going to convert our continuous time differential equation into a continuous time state space model. So a continuous time state space model works basically the same way as a discrete time state space model in terms of its structure. So let me rewrite our differential equation down here. It's theta double dot equals 3g over 2L, the length of the pendulum, times theta, plus 3 over 2L times x double dot naught. We're going to define our output y to be theta. So that's going to be like we're using a rotary encoder to measure the angle of the pendulum. And we're going to say that u is the acceleration of the base. So u is our input. So if you want to convert this into state space form, the first thing you want to do is define your states. The number of states is equal to the system order. So what's the system order? Well, it's the highest order derivative of the dependent variable that we're concerned with. So that's theta of t. So if you look at this equation, the highest order derivative here is the second order derivative. So this is a second order system. So it's going to have two states. And the number of states is also equal to the number of poles. Like if you turn this into a transfer function by taking the Laplace transform, you could also do that. So the first thing is establish the number of states. So that's 2. Once you know the number of states, there are an infinite number of ways to define what those states are. But I'm going to give you one easy option. And this is it. You set your first state equal to the dependent variable itself, theta. And you set the second state equal to the first time derivative of theta. And if this was like a third or fourth order system, I mean, we won't do this, but like you would make the third state equal to like the next derivative of theta. So you can follow this procedure for nth order system, like fifth or sixth order, whatever. But this is only second order, so we're stopping there. The next thing you do, you take the derivatives of these state equations. So if you take the first derivative of x1, this would be theta dot of t. But notice this, theta dot of t is equal to our second state, x2. So I'm going to say that this is equal to x2 of t. Because we're going to want to write these state equations in terms of the states we've defined. So, all right, x2 dot, that's equal to theta double dot of t, because I'm taking the time derivative of theta dot. And look up here, we already have the equation for theta double dot from doing the hard work of making our equation of motion. So this is 3g over 2L times theta of t plus 3 over 2L times x double dot. So the acceleration of the base. And just like we did for the first state, I want to write this in terms of our states. So like theta is x1. That's how we defined it. And x double dot, we defined that to be our input. So now I have two first order state equations in terms of the states themselves and the input. If you've taken MAE 340, you've done this a lot. So once you do this, we're going to assemble our state space equations in matrix form. So I want to start with the output equation. Y of t, I know it's equal to theta. We decided that we're measuring that angle, but I need to write that in terms of a matrix equation like this. Y is c times x plus d times u. So I'm going to put my state vector here, and then I'm going to put my input over here. And I know that y overall, this is just a note for myself, it should be equal to theta, which is equal to x1. So I need to set up a matrix equation to make this true. So this should be 1, 0 here, and then a 0 here. So this is my C matrix, this is my D matrix, and like I said, the D matrix is usually 0. So if you multiply this matrix equation out, you'd see that it's equal to x1, which is what I wanted. All right, this next one, we're going to do the state equations, like the first order ones. So x1, x2 dot, it's going to be a matrix times my states plus another matrix times my control input. So this is a little more difficult, but it's just matrix math once again. I know x1 dot should just be equal to x2. So it would be 0 times x1 plus 1 times x2 plus 0 times u, because I know x1 dot doesn't depend on the input at all. So that's my x1 dot equation. My x2 equation, I know it's 3g over 2l times x1 plus 0 times x2. And then it's 3 over 2l times my input. So this right here is A, and I say A sub c for continuous. And this is B sub c for continuous. So just like that, this is our continuous time state space model. If you want to convert a continuous model into a discrete time model, in my opinion, this is always the first step. Convert your continuous time model into state space form by making these matrices. So now, let's talk about converting this to discrete time. Okay. So now you have a continuous time state space model. So that means you have this C matrix, you have this D matrix, you have A continuous, you have B continuous. We got those right above. I want to convert this into a discrete time state space model. Now there's a couple assumptions that we make. And the important one is zero order hold on the control input Let me explain what that is. So I'm going to zoom in down here. So this is going to be time on this axis. This is going to be my control input. So my control input as a function of time. Now we know when we're implementing a discrete time system, we only issue commands at discrete points in time. So like each of these points in time is separated by t seconds, our sampling period. So that means our controller, it is only telling our system what the control should be at these points in time. So I'm just making up a control signal here. So our controller just spits out these discrete points. But what happens in between those points? So in practice, we build these things called zero order hold circuits. And what they do is they say, okay, you gave me this command right here. Until you give me the next command, I'm just going to hold this fixed. And then when you give me the next update, okay, now I'm going to switch to this and I'm going to hold it. And then you're going to give me the next one and I'm going to hold it. And so this is why I use the stairs command, you may have noticed, when I'm plotting my control inputs in Matlab. And that's because this is what in real life the control signal will actually look like. A zero order hold circuit is going to hold your control until it receives a new update. So these discrete time equations on the right, when we're making this conversion, these are taking into account the assumption that this is what our control inputs are going to do. So here's what you need to focus on. The C and the D matrices, if you go between continuous and discrete time, they don't change at all. They're the same. So like above, we said the C matrix was 1, 0. So it's going to be the same for the discrete time. The D matrix is also just going to be the scalar 0. What's going to change is your A and B matrices. For the A matrix, you might not have seen this before, this EXPM. That's the matrix exponential. So, like if you were to write this out, A is going to be E to the whatever our A matrix was, 0, 1, 3G over 2L, 0, and then we multiply that by our sampling period, whatever that is. The way you calculate the matrix exponential, it's interesting. It's not like the regular exponential. I mean, it's the same idea, but you have to calculate it in different ways. So when you go into Matlab, you use this EXPM command. You don't use like the regular EXP. So, and then to get the discrete time B matrix, you're going to use this formula. So you have to calculate A first because B depends on A. So let's go right into an example of how we use these, because when you do this conversion, you're not going to do it by hand. You're just going to do this in Matlab. Calculating the matrix exponential by hand is impossible in most cases because it's defined as an infinite sum. All right. So that's what this next example is about. So we're going to convert the inverted pendulum equations into discrete time state space equations. You're going to get a different discrete time model depending on your sampling frequency, because we know that our sampling period is 1 divided by fs. In MAE 571, we took more than 2 classes to know how we should calculate the matrix exponential by hand. Yeah, that's right. If you take the graduate class, system analysis, I think that's 571, right? But we do talk about how you can do it by hand. In some special cases, you can do it, but yeah. But we're just gonna use Matlab, my friends. All right. So the first step in Matlab is to define your continuous time model. And here I'm just putting in the same equations that we wrote up above. You know, here's our continuous A matrix, our continuous B matrix, C and D. I don't put a continuous subscript for C and D because it's going to be the same thing for my discrete time model. All right, so to convert it to discrete time, using the zero order hold assumption, you define your sampling frequency, and then you get your sampling period by taking 1 divided by that. Here's how you can do the matrix exponential in Matlab. EXPM. Here is how we calculate the B matrix. So I'm just implementing these 2 equations in Matlab. So why don't we go to Matlab and show that real quick. Let's clear this. So I'm going to run this segment of code. All right, so what does A turn out to be? And B? So it's going to be the same size, a 2 by 2. If you take the matrix exponential of a matrix, you get back a matrix of the same size. B matrix is 2 by 1. Maybe I'll just take a second to write these down. Zero 0.0503. And remember, this is specific to the sampling frequency we chose. Like if I made this 50 hertz, I would get completely different A and B matrices. This is the special thing about digital controls too. You get a system that's tailored exactly to the conditions that you're going to be working with. If you just use continuous time controls techniques, you're not going to get the same precision of performance that you get with this tailored approach in digital controls. So we have a discrete time state space model. But I want to show you another way to do this. There's this command called C to D, continuous to discrete. And this uses the same exact formulas that I'm giving above. It's just like all contained. So the first thing you do is you have to define a continuous time state space object in Matlab. So you use the SS command and you give your continuous matrices in there. And then you create a discrete time system object by using C to D, operating on your continuous system, and then you give the sampling period as well. And then if you want to pull the A and B matrices out of that, you have to say like my discrete system dot A, my discrete system dot B. So I'll go to Matlab real quick just to show to you. I'll run those 4 lines. And you'll see like the A matrix, the B matrix. They're the exact same ones that we got before. So it's easy as that. If you want the details of how you get these equations, I have a set of detailed notes that I used in System ID because we proved these. I'll post those because it's pretty interesting to see. It's worthwhile to go through, especially if you've taken like a higher level system dynamics class. I think you'll appreciate this. Okay. So you start with a continuous time differential equation. You convert that to continuous time state space, and then you use the 0 order hold assumption. You use these equations, and it converts it into a discrete time model. So now it just relates specific points and times of this system. So at this point, we have our model. When we're proceeding with this regulator problem, the next step is to calculate that feedback gain matrix. Feedback gain matrix. K. And you choose it so that the system will match some target behavior, like we set up above. So it's easiest to show how you calculate this matrix when our state space system is in controllable canonical form. Right now, our system is not in controllable canonical form. I can still show you how to make this gain matrix when we're in this form, but the first time I show it to you, I want it to be in this form so that it's easiest to explain. So the way that we went to controllable canonical form before, I don't know if you remember this. This was last week sometime. But I showed how you can go to that form if you're given a transfer function. But we don't have a transfer function right now. We have like a discrete time state space model. So how can I convert that into controllable canonical form? There is a way to do that. But this is a good opportunity to show how we can go back to a transfer function from a discrete time state space model. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to convert our state space, this discrete time state space form, into a discrete time transfer function. So I'm going to convert this into like a g of z equals y of z over u of z. And once we have this, then we'll go back to state space in the controllable canonical form. But there's another reason it's good to show you this, because in the future you might decide you're designing some control system for something. Maybe at this point you'll be like, you know what, I want to use the root locus method. But for the root locus, we like to use transfer functions. So if you have a continuous time model for something, but you want to use the root locus method, you're going to have to get a discrete time transfer function for that system. So you're going to have to convert. But even in that case, you should use the approach that I showed you just above. First, you should go into state space, and then you should go to this transfer function. So the way we're going to get discrete time transfer functions is we're going to first start with the discrete time state space model, and then we're going to go to the transfer function. So I want to show you how to do that. We're blasting through a lot of content today. Okay. I'm going to show you a couple steps of this. So we're beginning with our discrete time state space representation. So we need to take the z transform of both of these equations. So let's do that. If I take the z transform of my output equation, I'm going to get y of z. So this is a vector generally. So this works for multiple input, multiple output systems. It's going to be c x of z plus d u of z. So this is just taking z transform. All right. We're going to do the same thing with our state equation, and we're going to have to use our backward shifting theorem because I have x at the previous step. So that's going to be z to the minus 1 times x of z. And plus b z to the minus 1 u of z. So you can take the z transform of matrix equations, and the backward shifting theorem works just the same way. One time step prior is z to the minus 1. All right, so I want to keep working with this state equation first. I'm going to bring this term over to the left-hand side. So I'm going to have x of z minus a z minus 1 x of z equals b z to the minus 1 u of z. And if you've taken some linear algebra, well, before we get to that step, I'm going to multiply this by z because I don't like working with z to the minus 1. I'd rather just have everything be positive z. Okay, now we get to the linear algebra step. If I want to factor out x of z, I have to have this identity matrix in here. And then to solve for x of z, I have to multiply the left and right sides by the inverse of this matrix, and you're left with this. All right. Now that I have this expression for x of z, I'm going to take it and substitute it back into our output equation. So that means y of z is c times zi minus a to the minus 1 b times u of z plus d u of z. And usually d is 0, and so I'm just going to assume that it's 0 in this case. Now here's the magic. This right here, this matrix is your transfer function, g of z. A little hard to believe, I know. But this is it. If you have a discrete time state space system and you want to get the transfer function that relates your output, or it could be multiple outputs to multiple inputs, you just have to calculate this matrix multiplication, and it'll give you the transfer function. Now, on the next page, I show you how you can do this by hand with our system, but if you do anything like bigger than a second order system, it's really hard to do it by hand. Okay. So the hardest part of doing this by hand is, so we got what? C times zi minus a to the minus 1 times b. Calculating this c, or this zi minus a to the minus 1 is the hardest part. So I won't go through, I won't spend too much time here. I just wanted to, like, you can go through all these steps later, but doing that multiplication, so I always do that first. You get this 2 by 2 matrix multiplied by this stuff. D was 0. So I start plugging everything in, and then you go back up here, and this is our transfer function, which relates our output to our input. And remember, our output is the angle of the pendulum, and the input was the acceleration, the horizontal acceleration of the base. And this transfer function is specific to sampling at 20 times a second, which I think would be reasonable for trying to balance something like this in real life. All right. Because we generally don't want to do this by hand, this is how you do it in Matlab. Let's go over to Matlab real quick. All right. So, yeah, here we go. This line. State space to transfer function, and then you put in your A, B, C, D matrices. Let's evaluate it. So it gives you the numerator of the transfer function and the denominator. So this is just polynomial notation in Matlab. So this is saying 0.0019z plus 0.0019 divided by z squared minus 2.04z plus 1. And if you go back to what I calculated by hand, same thing. 0.0019z plus 0.0019 divided by z squared, blah, 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 blah. So this is how you get that transfer function. Whew! We went through a lot of stuff. We're just about running out of time. Let me try to maybe recap real quick with a flow chart, okay? So a lot of times when we design digital controllers, you're going to have an ordinary differential equation to start with as your model. And that's like our inverted pendulum second order differential equation, right? Now, if you want to use digital controls techniques, whether that's root locus or state feedback, you need to convert this to a discrete time model. So what I'm proposing, this is the easiest way. Convert to continuous time state space. So that means you're going to get AC, BC, C, D. Then you're going to say, okay, what's my sampling time? And you might try a bunch of different stuff in real life. You might say like 20 hertz. Okay, we need it to be a little faster. Let's do 50 hertz. You can convert to discrete time state space. Using the equations I gave you up above. It's going to be the matrix exponential of your continuous A matrix times T. B is going to be I minus A, AC minus 1, BC. So those are the equations we use. This assumes zero order hold. So you can use these, or you could use C to D in Matlab, because it uses those same equations. Now, from this point, when you have this, you could use state feedback control, which is what we're going to do next class. We're going to say, okay, once I got this, how do I create a state feedback controller? But you might want to use root locus at this point. And to get root locus, you want to get a transfer function. This is how you get the transfer function. It's C, Zi minus A to the minus 1 times B. And I'm assuming the D matrix is 0 here. But it's much easier to use the command state space to transfer function in Matlab to do this. But man, these skills are super useful. I use this all the time because, I mean, if you get a model that's already in discrete time, that's perfect. But let's say that discrete time model is using a different sampling time than you intend to use or something like that. And you're like, oh shoot, this is for 50 hertz, but I want it for 20 hertz. So this progression gives you a lot of flexibility. And if you're modeling something by hand, and you get, usually when you're doing that, like if you use techniques from dynamic systems, you're going to get an ordinary differential equation. So this allows you to get whatever you need in discrete time so that you can use all the techniques we've been using in this class. And so for the video, I'll officially end the lecture here, but I'm going to hang out for a couple minutes. If you guys have any questions, concerns, I'm going to turn up these medieval jams a little bit. Please give some examples. Oh, we're going to do, a real life application? Well, the example we're doing, I think, is a good real-life application. Like, let me scroll up to the top. Z stars from the Z grid. That is correct, Chris. Like, okay, say this is a good practice problem for this. Honestly, like a lot of people do this, balancing an inverted pendulum on a cart. I think the only way to model this that I can think of is to do it by hand. Like, system identification is a way to get a model for something by just running an experiment. But think about running an experiment to get a model for this system. This system is unstable. So if I try to like move this cart back and forth and excite the dynamics so that I can get a model using system ID, I'm not going to be able to keep this upright in the first place. So really, I would be, in a real experiment, this would fall down to the bottom and I'd be getting a model of, a pendulum in its stable position. So, I think from a practical point of view, the only way you get a model for an unstable system like this is you have to start with a pen and paper approximation like we did here. But that leaves you in the situation where it's like, well, great, I have a continuous time model. What do I do with it? Oh, I forgot to show, like, if you take the eigenvalues of our A matrix, check this out. What do you see? From your knowledge of what discrete time roots mean. Yeah. Look at this root. 1.2. This tells us that our plant, our system, it's unstable, which goes with what we know about it. It's going to fall over. So that's why this is really cool for the regulator problem, because on its own, this system is totally unstable. And the only way I can think of getting a model for an unstable system, you can't do an experiment with an unstable system unless you know how to control it. And we wouldn't be doing this problem if we knew how to control it. So you got to do it on paper. And when you do that, you get a continuous time model. Then you got to convert it. Man, I think these balancing problems are so cool, though. They're not easy. What other questions do you guys have? You guys having a good day? Can you explain the fourth constraint in Project 1? Get started on Project 1, my friends. Let me pull it up. Because Project 1 is due Wednesday of next week, if my memory serves me correctly. Just start it right now, because like I have office hours today. You can ask me questions. Let's turn this chat box back on. Oh no, that's fine. Oh, whoops. I added some weird stuff at the top that doesn't need to be there. The fourth one. Are you talking about this one? Okay. So the fourth constraint for our project says this. The input voltage, so like your control signal is going to be the input voltage, U. It cannot exceed plus or minus 6 volts when we provide a step reference of 1 rotation per second. So this is a cool constraint because this is a practical thing you run into in real life. When you design a controller and you simulate it, say in Matlab or whatever, the control signal might say, okay, great, you need 12 volts. But in real life, I'm only using a 6 volt power supply. So that controller is too aggressive, like it requires too much power to actually use. So when you're designing your controller and you simulate it in Matlab, yeah, your step reference would be 1 times 2 pi. That's right. If you find that your controller requires more than 6 volts, and it might, it can also give negative voltages, you'll see. If it's more than 6, then it's not going to work in real life, because I'm going to use a 6 volt power supply with this thing, so we can't use any more voltage than that. So that's why we've practiced plotting the control input as well, because you have to see what the control signal is going to be to know if you can even produce that much power. Chris says, is the more accurate rise time formula suggested for the project, or is the approximation okay? I would use the approximation to make the boundaries in the z-plane. And then, I would pick some poles, some target poles based on those boundaries. But then when you simulate it, if you find out like the rise time is too slow or something, then you're going to have to pick some different target poles. So just remember, when we use that less accurate rise time formula, the point is to give us a starting point. So we know like the general region where we can pick a pole, but it might not be good enough. So when you're doing this, try to make your codes, generic, so that if you have to go back and change your target poles, like in my codes, I use the variable z star, and then I do everything with like z star later on, just so I can change it. And the sun's out today, guys. That makes me happy. I like to see that. This morning it was, if you're in Buffalo still, there was like a crazy fog. It was thick out there. But it has totally cleared up. 60 degrees tomorrow? Is it going to be overcast? Is it going to be sunny or what? I'm pulling up the weather app. 60 degrees. Looks like partly cloudy. Let's go to the beach, guys. JK. Wasn't it 60 degrees like 2 or 3 weeks ago on a Sunday? You thought you had blurry vision due to too much exposure to laptop light. Oh man. You gotta use that night mode. Snow on Friday. Jeez. It's all over the place. Wait, snow this coming Friday? Are you serious? What? I guess that's what the iPhone weather app is saying. It even says snow on Wednesday next week. Are you kidding me? Unreal. What's going on in life, people? Do you have any cool quarantine activities? Motorcycle on Tuesday and ski on Wednesday. I still want to get a bike, but I'm scared. When the weather's been nice, I've seen people outside blasting by on their motorcycle, and you're out of food and hunting rabbits? Things are getting dire for you. Sometimes I think it'd be fun if we had to revert back to, foraging and hunting, but probably if it happened in real life, I wouldn't like it. Don't be scared to get a bike. It's exhilarating. I did take the license class. Well, it must have been 2 or 3 years ago now. I'd have to take it again. But that's the only time I've spent on a bike, was in a parking lot for that license class. And I agree, it was exhilarating to be on the bike. I mean, we were only doing like loops and stuff, so I wasn't even on the open road yet. Until a distracted driver hits you. Just not worth it. Yeah, that's the battle in my mind. I'm like, sure, it'd be a lot of fun, but if you get hit, man. Have you ever been hit, Justin? I think I asked you that before. Do you ride a bike, Manny? Did you get hit? Is that what happened? A drunk kid on a bicycle cut me off and I crashed once. Not too bad. See, that's the thing. You talk to anybody who's been on a bike a couple years, they have at least one questionable near-death experience that could have gone one way or the other. Kid was okay. I was fine. Bike was totaled, but insurance paid for a better bike. Oh, yeah. Distracted drivers. People on the phone. Crazy. Crazy, crazy. Oh, Manny, so your exam, I left it at school. I'm going to go back this afternoon, pick up those exams. There's like 3 or 4 people, their exams are in my office, so I got to pick those up and finish those up. So you'll get those real soon. Sorry about the delay on that. I hear you, Justin. You got to get out there and live this life. No, I haven't graded it yet. Manny. All right, take it easy. I've been spending some time reading books. Let me show you my book. I got this super fat book. Manny, you would, if I get a bike, you would ride with me. Let's do it. You guys know that book? It's from the King Killer Chronicles, which is supposed to be, like, if you like Game of Thrones. I didn't read Game of Thrones, but people say, I know. I was like, I want a fat book for the quarantine. But it's like, so it's fat, but it's an easy read. Like, the way it's written is really smooth. You know, just some books, when you read them, it's like, oh, wow. I can read a bunch of pages and it's not exhausting. I don't know, it's pretty good. I could see it being made into a TV show. It's got all the cool, fun characters, the humor, the intrigue, the drama, the romance. You've just been gaming. Hey, that's a good activity as well. I've been playing this older Ghost Recon game. It's I think it's called Wildlands. I've been playing it with my brother and my brother-in-law. Where's the gaming live stream? I know, I should. I have the capture card and everything, so I could hook it up. Maybe on an off day. Tuesday, Thursday or something. Friday afternoon. The sequel is free to play for a little bit. Yeah. I'm having a good time. It's a good way to connect with people in the quarantine. What's the Division like? Is it like open world? Is it the same as Wildlands, or like what's the deal? Monster Hunter has been consuming the last week. Monster Hunter, I might be able to get into that. The Division's open world and you can have a party. Cover-based loot shooter, PvE, but there's other places that are PvE, VP. Oh, that's cool. I wanted to check out, I don't think I have a computer that can run it, but Escape from Tarkov. That looked kind of interesting. So good. Is it going to come out on console? Ridiculously hard. Still in beta. Right, it's not even officially out yet. I watched Dr. Disrespect play that a couple times. That guy cracks me up. I'm working on putting up the notes from today before I forget. Valorant. What is Valorant? I haven't even heard of that. Similar to Valorant. Let's look at a little gameplay.
I will
Utility A short, but haven't pushed.
Whoa. The look of it makes me think of, what was that Blizzard first-person shooter? Overwatch?
Jet's lit.
Yeah, it feels like CS:GO with Overwatch animation or something like that.
One enemy remaining.
I will see you again.
Good job.
Interesting. So what's their spin? Is it just supposed to be like a revamped CS:GO, or is it more? Yeah, like you even run with the knife and whatever. It just seems like the same. That game's overdue for like a facelift, though.
Yeah.
You know, how old is it? Like 15, 20 years?
Because they took forever to keep it out before.
This is our turf.
Interesting.
Got one.
Get out of my way!
Unique abilities like Overwatch. What I am really interested in, all right, this is the last thing I'll do, is this Half-Life game. And it's VR, right? This looks so sick. But you need like a serious rig to even run this, right? Isn't the like the Valve VR system, I think, what isn't it like $1,500 or something? If this game had failed, I think it would have been the death of VR gaming. Yeah. This game makes me think like, wow, VR is really gonna continue to do some cool things. Because I think about people like my mom. My mom really wants to get into video games like this. But because she didn't grow up, you know, with consoles like we did, it's really hard to just pick up a controller and control things, like 2 joysticks, whatever, even mouse and keyboard. Like we take for granted that we grew up with it and we're really fluent. But like think about this VR, like you can just use your hand, open the cabinet, use your hand, pull something out, and just do like all the... Speaking of VR, hint, hint, Chris. I mean, that a VR treadmill, like a building one that really works smoothly, that would be... Because even in this one, you can't walk around. Like they use this, what do you call it? Like hopping or something?
Combine use.
You select...
Are they safe for people?
Yeah.
Did you see the professor who taught
you
class
sure?
in Half-Life, Alex? No, I didn't see that.
Ow, ow, ow.
I just think it's so cool.
Hey, you were right. These are great.
Because anybody could get into this. You can draw on the glass with markers? Alright, let's take a peek real quick.
Should have a quick review of them, and let me tell you about each of them.
No way.
Sad that I'm missing my marker. You know, I can't just go buy a new one these days. Did I leave it outside? So, let's go over each of these. Complementary angles are angles whose sum is equal to 90 degrees.
Oh,
And
come
complementary
on.
angles are, together they're going to form a right angle. So if I have, like this angle, and let me see if I can do it. They don't have to be
Strider.
this angle.
Stider, whatever. I don't want to talk
And if
about
I
that
tell you, oh, this angle over
gross-looking
here
robot.
is
That needs to be
30
banished
degrees.
from
Okay, and
the
this
robotics
angle
community.
is complementary with this angle.
Who
So we know that
would make a
together,
spider?
they're gonna equal,
Yeah, I'm gonna do office hours, Manny. 3 p.m.
this angle plus this angle are gonna equal 90 degrees.
Oh, this is
Well,
so cool.
just because we know what the word, because again, they are non-adjacent, they are not next to each other, right?
Unbelievable. All right, guys. I'm gonna go eat some lunch. That's what I'm gonna do. Gotta eat. Gotta stay in the routine. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for coming to class. I'll be back at 3 p.m. if you have any questions for office hours, etc., or if you just want to hang out. Stay healthy, guys. Thank you. Enjoy your day.